So talking about developer sandboxes, yeah, there we go. Michael James, I work at Priceline. Said back in the day, Java developer, moved to Node front end, ended up doing DevOps the past 4 or 5 years. The current state of, where the sandboxes come from. I'm curious, in the earlier keynote, there was that nice chart of not really doing it, a little bit doing it, leading it. How many folks here are in that first bucket, not really doing it, just getting started? Okay, that's this half. That's where this came from, right? We had a whole bunch of infrastructure that was heading on 15 years old. We had the opportunity to do a new start. So build from the ground up, a new front end, really great. We were tied to, we had this back-end system that just didn't work that well, hard to maneuver, not agile in any sense. Business request really said, do things faster, right? The earlier talk, right? Better, faster, cheaper, do all three at once. We had this opportunity to build from the ground up, a cloud-ready, in our 4-year-ago perception of that, how we would do this. So we ended up with this new infrastructure, this new application pattern that was really ready to go fast. So we had a bunch of developers turning out lots of changes, but we have this nice new front end still tied to the back ends that don't work that well, hard to move, slower, led to some problems. Our old deploy pattern, right? Lots of developers deploying lots of changes everywhere. This is the pattern that we had early on, right? We had a whole bunch of developers all lined up, write some code, test it locally, deploy it to some environment. Everyone gets bogged down. Not sustainable, right? If you have this model and you put a really fast front end on top of it, it doesn't buy you much. One of the things that we tried before this last iteration, if we make another environment, that's great. We can go twice as fast. Not really, right? You still end up with people bogged down, 2 environments. I forgot something, release velocity numbers. It was slow. The earlier slides today are at 46 times faster if you're a cloud friendly. We had the CEO basically say, I'm tired of having people tell me it takes me 2 weeks to make a change to text, just copy on the website. 2 weeks is too long for that. So to build a new environment, in the old pattern, right, where Priceline mostly is, and some of you still are, lots of different folks, right? You need Unix folks to spin up new boxes. You need the application, our SRE team, right? How do we configure those boxes, right? What do we install in it? How do we install it? How do we configure it? How do we route to this new thing, right? We have limited hardware. We have to route differently, a new DNS, all those things. One problem that we ran into that I didn't have originally in here, but is a valid problem, right? If it takes too much effort to test my code, I'm making a small change. I don't have time to wait for QA. I'll just push to prod, right? If you Google test and prod, it's a thing, right? Everyone's done it. I've done it once or twice, and as often as not, it bit me. And I'm just going to make this one small change, which turned into a bigger problem and a bigger problem. Limited testing ability just increases your risk to your environment. What developers are looking for, right? I want to be able to test my code. That's the important thing. The talk yesterday about testing, which was also very good, you can do all the unit testing you want, but you need to test your code in the whole environment, right? You need to test, how do I get into my application? How do I get out of my application? Does it work in the whole suite? That's an important thing for developers to do. You can write automated testing, but having users just go through it, users are going to break things. If you write a script, your script will work, but users will still be able to break things. Testing close to production, having an environment that is less likely to have other people's code in it is also important. The third one is one that really has made a huge difference. I can write my code in my local environment. I can run things locally. It works great. I can't give that to the business user who requested the change, and they want to come and look at it. Do my changes actually do what the business user requested? Being able to just give them, here's a URL, it's live, it's real. The business user can then, at their schedule, go validate it and give you feedback on it before you've committed your code, before you've even really completed your development process. Give them a chance to see it much earlier. The other one that I think doesn't get as much credit, I guess, do side-by-side testing. I can spin up my environment, I can look at my code, I can compare it to what's currently in production and see what the changes are. Does it actually work the way I want it to work? And put an offer in at Priceline, or an offer in here, an offer in there. Do they both work the same way? What we ended up with this sandbox is basically every developer, every feature branch gets its own dedicated environment, so that train of developers queuing up turns into every developer gets their own individual workstation or their own individual environment. It's scalable. As much hardware as you have, you can keep scaling up. So my earlier question, right? If you're already doing Docker and Kubernetes, this is less important, right? Because you can do this on the fly. You can spin up a whole new Kubernetes environment. You're great. What we ended up doing there are from Priceline CentOS, right? We built an image that looks like our production VMs, right? It has the same patches installed, the same Priceline configuration, made it into a Docker container. Given that, without having the application teams write Docker files, we basically wrote a Docker file that said, give me your app, I'll drop your app in our pretend VM. We'll tell you, this VM pretends like it's in QA or in prod or whatever, so the resources you're looking for will be available the same way. So just like your code runs in a QA VM, it'll run in a QA Docker image the same way. We run your app the same way we do in production. We use PM2. I wouldn't do PM2 in a container in Kubernetes, but in this case, we want to make this Docker image look just like production as much as possible for the developers. No changes in the developer application code. It works the same way. One of the things that worked well to make this really work, DNS Magic. So we create the way it works for us, we create the branch you're committing or you're making a sandbox out of, the commit shot of the current commit is part of your host name. Through DNS wildcarding, all those requests get routed to our container, and we get to route them properly. NGINX, we drop a config file in our NGINX config directory with that same host name, and NGINX knows how to route this container traffic. It made it so that it was something that we could do on the fly, very scriptable, and it works. Real quick, just NGINX. So the top one, foo.sandbox, right? DNS resolved this to some IP address. NGINX running on that IP address has a config file that knows about foo.sandbox. It routes to that server config. If you send any other traffic there, it routes to the default NGINX config. It's what makes it work. We've talked about building a new version of Sandbox at Priceline, and the magic is really in the NGINX config. I'm really happy with it. The flip side, what we do is the Proxy Pass. So demo it a little bit, but right, Proxy Pass, one more plug for NGINX. It just seems to work. I don't know, I've run into very few applications where it just kind of does what you want it to do. I don't know if unique in thinking that, I don't think so, but we used to use Apache a lot, Apache config files for proxy. It works, it doesn't work as well. You have to think more about it. With NGINX, it just kind of works. Proxy Pass, right, you give it some string, it'll proxy pass It'll either pass that through in the first case. In the second case, it will actually swap the context out for you. It's just, it does what you want it to do. So did a real quick demo to show how this works. The basics, right? Website about dogs. In this case, right, the production site is just some static HTML pages. I made a website about my dogs. It's a bunch of static HTML pages, how you might start. We want to make it more dynamic. So if I put more dog images there, I want it to automatically be able to pick those images up and show me all the images, not have to create, update HTML all the time. Let's see. Hey, there we go. So my dogs. Right? Click this page, I get 3 dog pictures. This is all static HTML. Now, there's no way I'm going to be able to see that. Display. Should do this before. DI. All right. Glasses. Forget it. All right. All right. So, it was cats before, switched to dogs. So we have a home page, shows some stuff. Search shows some, here are all the dogs, and then details for each one. So Node.js, we're going to make our search page dynamic, be able to see all the dogs all at once. We're going to build a sandbox to test this out. So our current config, right, is a stock HTML web server. It has some HTML. Here it is. Sandbox, and this is the part that makes it work, right? So for the contexts that are of interest, so we have slash, we have a search, and we have details. So the slash and the details, they just proxy pass to our existing production website. So we get the full website features going through our server named Sandbox. What's different is this middle one. Back, thank you. It will proxy to our Sandbox instance, right? A Node code running some Node.js code to render the same HTML, but the newer version of it, right? So one of the things we're doing today at Priceline, we have lots of small applications. Each application gets built. I have version 1. I'm going to build a whole new, brand new version, whatever the latest JavaScript framework is. It's the same, but it's completely different. That's a case where being able to do a test like this gives you the ability to look at the whole website, have your traffic go to your new instance, which is completely different than the old one, but still seamlessly blend them all together. And just for, say tab. All right, so same home page. Oh, there we go. Who's a good dog? So it's a whole different website, right? This is Node.js generated. It's from the outside looking in, right? It looks the same, right? It's go back to search, right? So as a user of the site, can't tell the difference, right? They're functionally the same, just through the sandbox and this logic, right? We're able to wrap our existing website in this proxy layer and route all the traffic to my new app separately. One of the things that was interesting, so this started NGINX Conf a bunch of years ago, did this as kind of a proof of concept. Our sandboxes have gone through 3 iterations, I guess, right now, each time getting a little, adding more features. It's become a standard part of the Priceline code review process, right? You have a pull request to validate your code as one of the requirements for the teams is a link to their sandbox. So any user who's looking to validate, did this code do what it should do, gets a link, they can go to the sandbox, they can see that code running in a Docker container off by itself, like with the whole rest of the site, mixed in with their code. Mentioned Kubernetes, all this changes. One of the things we're trying to do is to figure out how do we take the same sandbox approach with the NGINX Proxy Pass layer in front of your new version of your code. How does that work in Kubernetes? What things are important, what things are different? Maybe the whole thing goes away. I don't know, I don't think so. The Priceline website is too large, right? If I have a rental cars search application and I make changes to that, I still need all these other aspects of the site that are just too much in the old pattern of monolithic. It's not moving, it's almost deprecated but not quite state. So I still need that functionality. Another open question we have for NGINX, in general, more NGINXs that are easier to, smaller, more configurable NGINXs, or fewer that are easier to manage, but the configuration is more complex. Somewhere in the middle, there's a good balance. We haven't figured that out yet, but the sandboxes have been a way for us to kind of test it out, because we have fairly complex, right, for our website. I think we currently have 30-ish front-end applications, so our NGINX sandbox is 30 different proxy pass rules that basically route each individual piece of the application wherever it needs to go, either to the target backend or to the node application. We can manage that in Sandbox. We should be able to manage it across the board for production traffic. Email, if you have any questions about this, think it would work for your environment, happy to help. We have some stuff on GitHub. I was actually going to put this on GitHub if you just want something that works you can take back and say, here's how it works. Looking for jobs, we're always hiring, so my required blurb from the HR folks. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Are all of these generally UI components going to say an app? So, what is the exposure? Is it make it available there?
That is a good question. Did kind of gloss over that. So when I talked about in the early on, right, the old price line and the new price line, it was really just the front end that we were building out new. So the website is new Node.js React applications. Doing that in the sandbox is easy because we're starting at where the customer comes in, and then we manage the routing behind it. A lot of the services folks have asked for the same sort of functionalities to say, I have a new version of my service, I want to stick it in before I deploy it to one of my target environments, I want to do the same sort of thing. The routing for that just gets much more complex. That's the kind of thing that probably isn't the kind of thing we'd build ourselves. That's Kubernetes, Spinnaker, those sorts of things. A canary deploy of a service. That's probably those sorts of applications would be more of that sort of functionality. But yeah, the fact that it's the front end made it easier. We're able to, through the DNS, get the client-side calls, through the environment variable in Docker, get both the client and server-side calls to both go to the same place through the routing and the environment. Yeah. Yes?
What are you using for configuration?
And also the same part, we actually currently for our node applications, the decision was early on to say that we don't need configuration management. The applications are easy enough to deploy that if you want to change your config, you would rebuild it and redeploy it. Having said that 4 years ago, things have changed since then. Right now console on-prem, we get the Kubernetes config map would be the config of choice. But yeah, it's like I said, all this was built 4 years ago, or in the past 4 years, to try and make these things as light and small and easy and nimble as we can make it. Business reasons have come up to say we need more details, we need a little bit more complex. So we're going to have to do that at some point, but haven't had to worry about that one yet. Any questions? Comments, thoughts? All good? A few minutes early. All right. Thank you all very much.